All right, another FedSmart podcast. Looking forward to this episode. It's a episode pertinent to the times. We're getting a lot of questions about, how should I be allocated in my TSP? Am I too aggressive? Am I too conservative? How do we know what's going to happen? People seem to think, Stephen, that you and I have the crystal ball. They want to know what the market's going to do later this year and next year. And
I'm pretty sure we wouldn't be talking to them if we did. We'd be on a beach somewhere.
We're retired with a
Yeah.
drink and an umbrella in it, and we'd know exactly what to do. We'd be, outperforming Warren Buffett, and wouldn't be doing our amazing podcast. The people would be missing out. So
Yeah, so it's a good thing we don't.
yeah, so they should be happy that we don't have the crystal ball. However, we won't give any financial advice today. We will give you some very, very good information to help you
Good
decide what to
rules
do
of
with your
thumb.
TVs. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's rule number one that we're going to talk about in a second. Don't take general financial advice. But the good news is, generally speaking, you typically can allocate to where no matter what the market does, if it does well or if it starts to go down, if you're correctly set up, then it's not going to affect your retirement, hopefully, as we'll talk about here in a second, because there's different stages of life, Stephen. The accumulation phase is different from the distribution phase, as we talk about a lot. There's two different parts of retirement. Before retirement, you're saving the money, you're accumulating the money, and the distribution phase and investing and the way that you look at your funds, it's different in both. And so a lot of times, that's one of the main reasons we say don't take general financial advice, is because when you get to the distribution phase, especially, everybody's situation is incredibly unique at that time. How much money monthly they need, if any, as a withdrawal from the TSP. How often they need to pull from it, what other types of plans they have. Do you want to pull every quarter and go on a trip, or
Their
do you,
age. Their age
their
is a big one.
age, how many years you have left in life, your health. You might be somebody that could potentially live 30, 40 years in retirement that you need to plan for. And unfortunately, I've even talked to some people that are terminally ill and they only have 5 to 10 years. And so many different factors. Do you need to leave money to beneficiaries? And so that's the first thing. You have to allocate and invest based on what you need your money to accomplish. And because everybody needs their money to accomplish different things, means that you need to be allocated different. Okay. If we talk to Stephen, you and I do sometimes 50 meetings a week with federal employees. And how often do we just have a cookie cutter answer for every single person? Here's how you should be allocated. Next, here's how you should be allocated. When you walk into a doctor's office, so every single time they say, here's a prescription for high blood pressure, high cholesterol. Have a great day. We'll see you next time. No, they're going to ask you, what are your health situation? What are your symptoms? What are you trying to accomplish? What do you need to treat? And it's the same thing with financial services. Everybody should be allocated differently, which is why you should not be listening to your buddy who's done really, really well and averaged 10% returns every single year in the market. And he thinks he does have the crystal ball and can read the economic, times and know what the market's going to do. No, he's not. Again, we're seeing a lot. We wanted to do this podcast because we're seeing a lot of patterns and habits that we saw back in 2007, 2008, when I was talking to a lot of people. Some people that were very, very, very aggressive and, had a large portfolio, and they're very, very overconfident, and they're retiring that year or next year, and they need decent amount of withdrawals from their assets. And we were telling them, go more conservative based on your goals. And some people listened to us, which was awesome. Some people did not, and we saw what happened. And so again, when we're say that you don't take general financial advice, you don't listen to your friends that are doing really, really well, that's because everybody's situation is different. So we're going to give you some ideas. Again, we're not going to give financial advice as we just talked about, because everybody is different, but we're going to give you some rules of thumbs and some things to think about and research, and also ways to get a specific plan for you set up so that you can accomplish your goals. But again, you do not take general financial advice. There's a lot of online gurus right now that we're seeing that, I saw somebody the other day that online said, oh, the market's got 3 more years of gains, and everybody should be 100% in equities. I mean, that's what he said. And so, Stephen, you and I have ran into people, and again, especially back in 2008 and 2022, we saw a lot of this as well, where people were 100% in the market and they're pulling a decent amount of their portfolio. And those are the type of people, if you sustain large losses in your portfolio, your chance of running out of money goes up exponentially. So, again, we're not saying everybody should be parked in cash. We're not saying that at all. We're saying we're going to help you kind of get an idea of maybe the different stages of retirement, some things to consider and research, and then also some ways to then find out how to get specific advice for your situation. And so when you're looking at the retirement phase, you want to break it down into a couple different phases, so you know that maybe this is how you should be allocated based on the phase that you're in. Now, when we look at TSP assets and we're looking at retirement assets, which is what we're talking about today, that's a little bit different than like your savings, right? Your rainy day fund or your 3 to 6 months expenses or whatever you go by, some money that you may need to access quickly. That, usually should be invested pretty conservatively, right? We're talking about retirement assets. And one of the main reasons that you're saving for retirement, and if you're not saving, and you should be, because one of the main reasons you start accumulating in your TSP or IRAs or whatever is to help make sure you have enough income in retirement and enough money for emergency discretionary expenses. When it shifted to the FERS program years ago, for a FERS employee to maintain the same lifestyle and to be comfortable, quite often you need to have a monthly distribution from your TSP in addition to your pension and your Social Security. So when we're saving for retirement, it's so that we're able to retire one day and have hopefully the same lifestyle, and in some cases maybe a better lifestyle than while we were working, because maybe you're paying off debts and things like that. So when we're looking at saving for retirement and generating enough income and having some money for emergency discretionary expenses and long-term care and inflation and a lot of the things that life's going to throw at you, the first phase that we're looking at is what's called the accumulation phase, where you're saving for retirement. And this phase is typically 3 or more years out from retirement on average. So if you have 3 or more years from when you're going to touch the money, okay, that's the key, from when you're going to start distributions. If you're 3 or more years out, that's where you typically want to be more aggressive. And again, we're not saying everybody be 100% C, 100% S, be aggressive. No, we're saying you want to take a look at being more in the market at that point, because you can weather the ups and downs. You're taking advantage of something called dollar cost averaging. And we're speaking from experience here. Stephen and I, like I said, we have the benefit of talking to people that are retired and retiring, and we get to see in hindsight what they did. And we've seen people that parked in the G fund their entire career because they were scared, or they were arguably a lot more conservative than they should have been because they never really researched the market or looked at where they should be, and they have a much lower balance than they should.
Well, you know
Because
how many people too, like, will run meetings, and so many of them have said that when they got onboarded into their agency, the only thing they were told about their TSP is the G fund's a safe fund. So it kind of like guided them that direction. And then for some lucky few with really good colleagues that kind of track things and they talked about their allocations, they said, hey, you got to get out of the G fund. You got a 30-year career ahead of you, go like C fund or S fund or what, or, something like that. And it literally saved their retirement.
yeah. Yeah. Or allowed them to retire much sooner than they wanted to, or have a much
Yeah.
healthier balance, for sure. Because we've seen people that were too conservative over their career compared to somebody who weathered the ups and downs of the market and stomached that. So we've seen anywhere from 2 to 5 times the amount of balance of somebody else that had a similar salary, similar number of years contributing to the TSP, compared to somebody who just was a little bit too afraid. And we get this comment all the time. Well, I'm not a financial expert. I don't know what to do. I work in geology. I work in this. I don't know financial services. And so if you don't, again, the rule of thumb is to research and to be as much in the market as possible years out, because you can weather the ups and downs, and you're contributing to the market, and you're taking advantage of something called dollar cost averaging. So the further out you are from retirement and the distribution phase, a good rule of thumb is the more aggressive that you should be and be able to be. And we talked to a lot of people that said, well, I just don't like risk. I don't like the market. The market scares me. Well, you need to do a little bit of research and you need to dig into it. You need to invest and allocate based on your risk tolerance, but also understand why you have that risk tolerance. Do some research. Yes, the stock market can be scary. You hear horror stories like 2008, 2009, where the market dropped, anywhere from you lost 30% to half of your portfolio. But people that were investing in that time, they bought stocks 30 to 50% on sale. And so if you weather the ups and downs of the market, you do that research and understand why you have that risk tolerance and get to the point where you can invest and then maybe just not look at it. Don't let the stock market determine your mood, your happiness. If our stock market was dependent upon the market, or excuse me, if our happiness was dependent on the stock market, we'd be
It'd
very,
be
very moody
depressing.
people. Yeah, we'd be very depressed quite
Or
often.
stressed
Yeah,
out.
stressed all the time. And so I was just talking to my brother-in-law a few weeks ago, and he said it stresses him out. So he only takes a look at it at the end of each quarter, and then he does it where he's in a place where he knows he's got a few hours to kind of digest it. And he's years out from retirement, and he knows, and he's in a good spot. He knows that I've got time, but it just bothers him a little bit, and he doesn't know why it bothers him, but then he just gets over it. But he looks at it once a quarter because he knows if he looked at it every day, he'd be a little bit depressed, like you said, or stressed even. So you want to take a look at that. And that's the first phase, is the accumulation phase. And again, the more aggressive you are, if you look at the stock market history and go into the TSP and look at the C fund, S fund, I fund, F and G, historically being more aggressive in the C and the S fund, you'll see your average annual returns over time are going to be significantly higher than if you're going to be in the G fund or the F fund and things like that, the more conservative funds, but you had to ride some ups and downs of the market. So that's the first phase for those of you who are getting into the federal government, or your years out. Again, the rule of thumb that we like to say is 3 or more years out. You want to be more aggressive and research that. But then when you get to the retirement phase, where you're looking at retirement and you're within 3 years of retirement and within 3 years after retirement, that's what we call the summit phase or the retirement phase. And then you look at, if you're within 3 years of retiring, you may need to start the third phase in a second, which is the distribution phase. And because you're getting closer to the distribution phase, you don't want to have large losses, or you want to try to prevent as big of losses as possible getting closer to the distribution phase. So you want to start looking at how you should be allocated so you don't sustain huge losses right before you start the distribution phase. And the reason that 6-year window we look at that is because, Stephen, historically, that is one of the most pivotal 6 years when it comes to retirement planning. Statistics show, if we have a loss in the 3 years before retirement, or 3 years before pulling from it and 3 years after, our chance of running out of money goes up exponentially.
Yeah, and that's a good point. It's not when you retire that we're looking at. It's when you would potentially need to access your funds. If you have a distribution plan set up, that's where we're looking. Because you could say, well, we don't need to touch our funds until they make us at like required minimum distribution age, which in that case, then again, use the original rule of thumb that maybe you can stay more aggressive. The one thing that we always hear is, especially like 2022, 2008, these years, it'll come back. Well, it depends. It really depends. If you don't need to touch those funds and you can keep contributing, yes, historically it comes back. Everything changes during that distribution phase because now you could be solidifying those losses. And when you retire, you're not contributing or getting a match anymore. So it could take a lot longer to recover or not recover at all, depending upon what the market does.
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of people don't fully understand something called the sequence of returns. And like they said, oh, it'll come back. But they don't fully understand. And again, because you're not financial professionals, we don't fully expect you to understand this. But if you lose 50% of your portfolio, a lot of times we think, well, if I get a 50% return, I'm back to even. No, that's not how it works. If I have $100,000 and I lose half of it in the market, I'm at $50,000. So if I had 100, I lost half of it. Now I'm at 50,000. I need another 50,000 or 100% return to break even. And so we think if I lose 30%, if I gain 30%, I'm back to even. But that's not how it works. You need to gain much more than 30% just to get back to even. And then, like you said, Stephen, if I'm pulling from it, I lose 30%. And then I'm also pulling from it. So I pull another 5%. I've lost 35%. Then next year, the market goes up 10, but I'm still pulling 5. I actually only went up maybe 5. And so you're creeping back. And if you it's going to come back one day, and you look at the sequence of returns and you look at sequence risk, it's called, which affects us in the distribution phase. That is something that could cause us to never come back potentially. We talked to some people in 2008, 2009, where they had to make some major lifestyle changes, stop withdrawals, go back to work, things like that, because they were going to run out of money, because it's not going to come back the way that they think it is. And so when you get to the distribution phase, what you want to do is you want to start allocating more conservatively. And ideally, you want to be pulling from some funds that are not going to be susceptible to ups and downs of the market, which can be difficult in the TSP. There's one online guru that says, well, a conservative portfolio is 80% C and 20% G, and stay in the TSP. Well, that doesn't really make sense. I mean, first of all, there's not a trained financial advisor that's going to say 80% equities, 20% bonds is a conservative portfolio. That's not on the conservative side. That's still, maybe moderate, aggressive, definitely at least moderate. And the problem with the TSP is, again, if you're 80% C, 20% G, and the market dips, you would say, well, leave my C fund alone. I'm going to only pull from my G. You can't do that in the TSP. We have to pull proportionately. 80% of my withdrawals is still coming from equities and still solidifying those losses. And so that's where you need to set up a allocation and maybe use an IRA, or maybe use different allocations to make sure that, again, when you're pulling in the distribution phase and the market dips, that you want to not be solidifying those losses, and your chance of running out of money goes up exponentially. So you want to take a look at a couple things. And here's how, again, ultimately determines how you should be allocated specifically, is, like we said, how much time, what's your time horizon from when you're going to start pulling from the money. So that's your first thing you need to solidify. And if you're years out from that, then research you should be more aggressive than more conservative. If you're years and years out, at least 3 years or more out from the distribution phase, you want to be more aggressive. And then the second question, so the first question was, again, how much time until we pull from it? Like Stephen said, how old am I? How much longer do I need this money to last when I do start the distribution phase? Somebody that retires at 57 might want to allocate differently than somebody who's 75 and has RMDs and maybe not as long to live and things like that, potentially. So you want to look at how old you are. Third question is, you want to know what your risk tolerance is. How much of your money do you want to lose? Some of it, none of it, or all of it. Stephen, there's some people that in retirement, man, they just cannot stomach losses. If they lose money, it causes them to have an ulcer, or a breakdown. And I'm not even exaggerating. There's people that it's been really, really bad. And so if you can't stomach losses, and no matter what your friends say, but you probably should not be in equities, and heavily in equities, definitely. So you want to know what your risk tolerance is, but you also want to know why. You want to understand why your risk tolerance is the way it is, and make sure that it's factual. There's definitely, correct risk tolerance where, yeah, I'm in the distribution phase, so I can't stomach losses as much, but you might be, like I said, years out, and you're more conservative than you should be, just because investing in the market scares you. So don't let that, be the thing. And then the last question is, how much of my money do I need as a distribution? Somebody that also maybe needs 1% of their portfolio compared to somebody who might need 4 or 5% of their portfolio, they're going to be allocated differently, probably. So how much do you need, and when? Not
per year.
just
Yeah.
Yeah, per year, maybe that's not even a set thing too. You might say, well, I want to pull 20,000 a year to travel, and that's this percentage of my portfolio, right? And things like that. So based on how much you need or want per year is ultimately how you're going to determine that. Now, for a lot of people, that makes sense. That's easy, but for some people as well, it's like, man, that's a lot. That sounds like a full-time job. I don't even know where to begin. I still don't fully understand what you're saying. Well, that's where what you want to do, instead of taking general financial advice, you want to take specific financial advice from an informed, educated fiduciary retirement planner who knows the federal system. So if you don't want to do, the allocations and know how to invest and things like that, talk to a informed fiduciary retirement planner that's going to have your best interests. I talk to people all the time. I don't want to talk to somebody. They just want to roll my TSP. They just want to sell me something. There are good financial advisors out there that do have your best interest at heart, that do want what's best for you and are going to help you allocate correctly. You just have to find them. You have to weed through sometimes and wade through some conversations, talk to a couple different people. And one rule of thumb is if they're asking you questions right away, of where, how much money do you need? When do you need it? What's some other goals that you have? Are you concerned about long-term care? What's your risk tolerance? You can tell right away that they're asking some questions to allocate based on what you want to accomplish. If pretty quick in the conversation, they start saying things like, ooh, I've got a fund that everybody should be in, or I've got something that I can help you acquire. And they sound like they're just trying to sell you something without understanding your situation and needs. Then again, that's a big red flag. You can quiz them a little bit. The financial advisor, financial professional you're talking to, you can ask them, well, what's the C fund? What fund is the C? Is that stocks? What index does it mirror? What's the FERS system? When are FERS eligible to retire? A couple key questions, kind of softball lobs. And if they don't know the answers to those
What's
right
the
off the top of their
supplement?
head, yeah, what's the
Supplement's good.
supplement? It's a good one because only, well, not only, but they're probably a pretty well trained in the federal system if they know the supplement and can explain that to you. And so some questions like that to help understand if this financial advisor, and that financial advisor, one of the nice things about working with an advisor is they're going to take, the emotion out of investing. They're going to help set up an allocation based on what we were talking about, your time horizon, risk tolerance, age, and how much you need. And they're going to set it up correctly. And so not everybody out there needs a financial advisor. There's been several people I talked to that are doing really well on their own. They researched it, they've done well. But I would say, venture to guess, total theory, that a majority of people do need an advisor. It definitely helps with their situation and helps make sure they're set up correctly. Again, in 2008, 2009, the people I saw that were just overconfident in their investing and overconfident in what the market had done for them in recent years and didn't have an advisor are a lot of the ones that sustained pretty huge losses, and the ones that had an advisor that was able to say, yeah, the market's done really well the last, 9 years or so, but we've got this potential and you need this much money this soon, so we need to look at some different stuff. So don't be too overconfident. Again, we're in a run where the market overall, for the most part, has been doing really well the last 10 or 11 years. And so again, a lot of people are really overconfident in what the market can do and maybe are allocated incorrectly. So that's why we wanted to go through that for you today. If you don't know a fiduciary retirement planner, Stephen, tell them where they could find two that would definitely, and actually several that would want to help them out.
Well, I know a couple people, but you should go to fedsmartretirement.com, and there's a booking link for Jesse and myself on there, and we can go through good plan for you. And also, if you're not already following our Facebook page, which a good majority of you are, share this or follow it and share it with colleagues. We get questions all the time. How should we be allocated? And like I said, a lot of people, they were saved by some colleague just telling them, hey, maybe get out of the G fund because you have 30 years left. So follow our Facebook page. You can also share our podcast off fedsmartpodcast.com. And yeah.
Yep, definitely. So, right, like Steven said, right on there, you can book with us, be able to ask us questions, and there's no cost for the federal retirement strategy session to be able to talk through. And maybe it's not just TSP allocations, but you have any other question about your federal retirement as it's on the horizon, and you might be approaching the summit and then maybe you're getting close to the distribution phase. The way that you've done things in the accumulation phase does not always translate over into the next phases of life. So as you're approaching those new phases and you want to do a strategy session for free just to go through, how am I set up? What's my take home income going to be? How's my health insurance, life insurance, survivor benefits, all of that into retirement? How's that going to work? Stephen and I can go through all of that for you and get all your questions answered. If we don't know the answer, we can research it for you and get back to you. But Stephen's really smart. Most of the questions, he's going to know the answer right off the top of his head. So, but we're looking forward to having a conversation with you. So if you need, follow our Facebook page, ask questions on there, or set that free one-on-one. Share this with your colleagues. Let's make sure that if the market, we're not saying the market's going to correct anytime soon. We don't know, but it will go down at some point. What goes up comes down, and the market has ebbs and flows. So we just want to make sure our goal of the podcast today is just make sure that a lot of people are not overconfident and allocated incorrectly. I'd hate to see on our Facebook page, Stephen, where a lot of people have to change. They can't retire like they planned because they were too heavily in equities, or they were not allocated correctly because they just haven't looked at it, right? I just talked to a guy that, I mean, he had a really healthy balance because he started 30 years ago, put it in the CNS fund, and then literally never looked at it again, had to request his login information. And it's good that we had a conversation based on when he wanted to pull and how much he wanted to pull. And somebody like that just hasn't looked at it. If he wanted to retire when he wanted to retire, and the market happened to have a big dip right before, he would not have been able to accomplish what he wanted to accomplish. So there's
Well,
people like that.
I think a lot of people too don't realize if you're in traditional TSP or traditional IRAs, you are going to need to set up a distribution plan whether you want to or not, because they're
Right.
going to make you start pulling from those funds for required minimum distribution. So have a plan for that too. Be looking ahead. Maybe you have a lot of years, but that's good because there's things you can do ahead of time to alleviate that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the key thing is you can't just stick your head in the sand. And you also, for those of you who don't have your head in the sand, hopefully you're not following some online guru that has the crystal balls telling you what to do, and you're not overconfident, and you're able to create an allocation based on your specific needs and goals. And that's what we want for you. We hope you enjoyed this episode of podcast. Again, if you have any questions or anything like that, hit us up on our Facebook page, FedSmart Podcast, or our website, FedSmartRetirement.com, and we'll see you on the next episode.
See you on the next one.
FedSmart Podcast is meant for informational purposes only and should not be taken as financial advice or tax advice. FedSmart Podcast is not affiliated with any government agency or OPM. Jesse Black and Stephen Puckett offer advisory services through Integrity Wealth. Integrity Wealth and FedSmart are not affiliated. If you'd like an appointment, please go to FedSmartRetirement.com and schedule a free one-on-one appointment. Thank you.